Predators and parasites. What am I talking about when I bring these things up in so many of these videos? Predators, parasites. You could easily add in the ideas of vampires and demons and such into the mix because they're all essentially variations on a theme. But in our world, they manifest in many different ways. So it's one of those principal notions again. It's a fundamental baseline sort of basic code, underlying code to this particular construct, to this realm that we get to play in for a short time. Predators and parasites is an energy. It's an idea. It's even an egregore, you could call it, would be relatable to that because it's this collective sort of energy that we certainly feed into and not necessarily benefit from directly in obvious ways, but speaking again back to the idea of the trickster energy, it's that polarity necessary for us to be able to truly explore and experience and experiment with this human existence, with this particular avatar, with this expression that we've embodied. And when it comes to predators and parasites, you could even call it part of the aspect of the spiritual adversary, talking about the polarity of earthbound life and the expressions that we can entertain and engage with in this world, in this reality, in this 3D realm that we have chosen to become a part of. And there's probably not any real need to list off particular things because it's a sensing thing, it's a feeling thing, it's a psychic, spiritual, psychological, emotional thing, and of course physical, because everything starts in the ether, the etheric, before it manifests in the physical. Everything is populating this field of potentialities before it is ever seen or felt or experienced in the physical or chemical. So we have to remember that it's not simply what we see and what we're experiencing and the data that we're receiving through our primary senses, the 5 main senses that we experience as humans, because that's essentially an after effect. That's the downstream sort of culmination of these energies and ideas. And if you want to look at the toroidal sort of aspect of the energy of everything and how everything is kind of circulating around and around, concurrently going both ways too. It's coming, as far as our bodies and our energy systems are concerned, it's going from the root to the top and out, simultaneously coming down from the top and all the way in. And all of that is up to interpretation, of course. We each individually have different ways of interpreting and experiencing and exploring the energetic nature of this realm and of our body and of our energy systems. And it could be of great benefit to understand why certain things come in a certain way, why we come to illness and disease, how to dispel and reverse those things, how to reset and down-regulate perhaps if we're constantly being stressed out and pushed to extremes emotionally. I talked about the distress homeostasis in a video, and that level of capacity we have for emotional resolve and resilience, and how we're able to develop these things, or how if we're consistently and chronically pushed in certain directions in certain ways by, say, the parasites and predators, that range gets a lot smaller, so we're more easily overly sensitive to things or completely numb, right? If we keep shoving it down and down and down, suppressing it with chemicals or substances or just terrible lifestyle habits, lack of rest or sleep, lack of friendships, family communication, lack of a true passionate, purposeful creative outlet, that can go down and lower and we feel nothing, which is, I think, a rather terrible waste of a human experience. But at the same time, we don't want to be at the higher end of that spectrum and constantly on edge and constantly tense and tightening our chest and twisting around our belly and, essentially blocking off the energy flow from those energy centers and limiting the flow of life through us, through these circular movements and these toroidal sort of movements that naturally happen and naturally regulate themselves if we simply stop, if we catch ourselves in a thinking loop, in a emotional loop, in a parasitic sort of mind construct in sort of a propagandistic twisting of some reality, or buying into some sort of a narrative that is completely fabricated. And these things proliferate our reality and persist throughout the realm in varying degrees. So when we talk about the predator and parasite, I tend to talk about it more as a class of people, these so-called elites of the world, that their reality is perhaps based on a different kind of energy, a different sort of framework, a different paradigm. And as ancient as they are, they hand down that information and they hand down that framework, paradigm, and teach, they carry on this sort of practice throughout history. So for us to think that we can counter and resist that kind of information and ideas, that kind of attack and imposition, well, we'll have to really consider how involved we want to get in that and how much we're willing to put into that sort of a battle, if it is such a thing. Because you haven't been here very long in this lifetime. You probably don't remember any past lifetimes, what your family might have been through in the past. So we have the big idea of these ancient ruling sort of classes or groups and what they're engaging in this life, and everything that they play out they believe to be doing for their own reasons, for their own motivations, for their own experiences and expressions in this particular realm. And then we can bring it down to a personal level, or there's probably every level in between. There's that parasitism and predatory nature, that energy persists across all dimensions in society and across reality. And even within us, right? We have parasitic sort of ideas, predatory ideas. What's a parasite? It's something that kind of gloms on and sucks your energy and feeds off of you. And a predator is something that's kind of hunting you down and threatening to eat you alive, sort of thing. That fight or flight sort of mechanism that plays into that. Either you're passive and accepting and tolerating and just, this is just part of who I am, and it's part of my personality, it's part of my thought construct, part of my identity, or it's something that you need to be on constant alert, constantly defensive about, constantly worried about and anxious about, because at any moment it could come out of the woodwork, it could come around any corner, it could be some sort of freak thing that, it's just going to happen any minute now. Is both, playing both sides of the coin within yourself, that internal battle that is fatiguing, right? Exhausting, exasperating, on top of simply just living our lives day to day and contending with all the stuff that comes at us and the things that we are trying to achieve and to pursue in this life. And we can adopt all these layers and ideas of parasitic and predatory energies that can be debilitating, crippling, right? And it's pretty easy to throw around these titles too. We can start looking at people, it's like, oh, that's a vampire, that's a psychic vampire, energy vampire. Better stay away from them, or learn how to protect myself, put up my psychic shields. And to a degree, those things can certainly be of benefit, and why not? What can it hurt to put up? If anything else, it gives you permission to feel like you have some sort of natural resistance. And you do, that is energy like anything else. So you can decide how to use your creative energy, that spark. But if you're constantly needing to do these rituals and routines and practices because you're constantly worrying about being predated upon or parasitized, or some vampires are going to suck your energy and steal your life away from you, then you're losing the battle already, or perhaps you've even lost because you convinced yourself that you're a victim. And that in itself, that's an idea that's, if nothing else, the perfect example of, both a parasitic and predatory nature and energy that you use against yourself, because you internalize it and you become, it becomes hardwired into your body, into your presence, into your energy structure, into your auric and toroidal fields. Everything now is reacting to that program, that condition. So catch yourself perhaps when you're doing these things, so that you can reclaim that energy, reclaim that creative spark, reclaim that dominion, that agency over yourself. Because ultimately there are no victims here, in my view. Ultimately, we on some level are deciding and choosing how to experience and express this life. We're deciding and choosing the paths and the purpose and the meaning. We're deciding and choosing what value to give anything, how to define things, how to frame things. We're deciding all of these things on some level. We decided how to come into it. We likely put some sort of a framework or parameters in place before, existing in this particular avatar and coming into this particular life. It doesn't make sense that we're just kind of thrust into it, or that we were tricked or trapped. To me, that's just another form of escapism and, deference to some other authority, when ultimately that authority has always come from within. That spark that animates you, that fractal of the all is not a victim, is not a plaything for something else. Though it certainly may seem like this in this world because, again, of the proliferation and the persistence of these parasitic and predatory ideas and constructs, stories, social notions and cultural sort of aspects. And then you look at the politics and the economy and all of these other aspects, and how the parasitism and the predatory nature is persistent throughout. But to me, again, that's just, it's the flip side of the same coin. It's the same energy, just inverted, perverted, converted, and serves a purpose in some way. And if there wasn't any sort of resistance, we wouldn't exist in this way. If there wasn't any sort of polarity, we wouldn't be able to experience life in this way. So I don't think there's any mistake to that. There's no accident to it. It's just a matter of framing it differently, a different way of looking at it, and again, reclaiming that autonomy, that agency, because everything is essentially happening from the inside out. So you have to re-engage with how you are experiencing the world. Are you living through the feeling of your thinking, or living through the feeling of what the world's throwing at you?
Hey, I can't seem to shake. My mind needs a break.
And as we're going through our journey in this life too, we adopt these cloaks and put on the masks of a parasite and a predator in different ways, in different relationships, in different expressions in our family, community, society, in this, even as a nation, as part of a civilization. Certain countries and states behave in certain ways, largely because they are, influenced externally to be such, to react and to try and reconcile with impositions and ideas that are thrust upon them, whether it's from, Western empire that's constantly pitting nations against each other, creating all these false narratives with which to create wars and infighting and division, pulling the strings and pushing the buttons of religion and these important, spiritual and emotional and psychological things that those parasites and predators know very well how to manipulate us with. So we can see these things playing out in different levels all across society, all across the realm, and we can see it in our own backyard. And there's a lot of things we would probably wish didn't happen in certain ways, that they didn't exist in certain ways. We'd probably wish that governments were legitimate and that they weren't subject to corporate and transnational and banking interests and lobbyists and these strange, disruptive and erosive and completely spiritually void ideologies that have been pressed upon us in the last couple of decades. And these things come around in different cycles. And nothing that we're going through in this modern age in 2025 didn't happen in, over the last century and more. All of these things have played out in different ways. Whether it's the gender ideological thing or climate thing or pandemic thing or whatever fraud or hoax you want to talk about, they've played out in different ways throughout society, and they keep recycling these scripts. So I think it helps us to become aware that these cycles repeat, because we can recognize it, and once we can see it, we can name it, we can dispel its influence over us to a degree, and then step back into the idea of what's natural and natural law, and that we are, sovereign creator beings, and that we choose to what degree we are subject to any of these terms and conditions and offers and contracts, and whether or not we want to play along. So we can choose differently and take another direction at any time. We don't have to abide by these parasitic and predatory notions, even though, they're going to keep on coming. So how do we empower ourselves to not necessarily fight these things, because that which you resist persists. It's a oversimplification, but the more you put into the field and put into your mind, into your body, into your psychic energy and your aura and your field, the idea that you need to be on guard, that you need to be defending yourself, that you need something to be defended from and by, the more those things will be stronger and more prevalent elements in your life experience. Reality mirrors back, right? What we put out there. We don't necessarily recognize it in the moment either, do we? It's tricky sometimes, because we take it in stride with our day-to-day. We take it in stride. We put, little subtle accommodating and compromising labels on things, so that we don't constantly find ourselves overwhelmed and frustrated and beaten down by life. Or the other way around, we don't bloviate and pander only to the ego and to boasting and being excessively prideful and falling into, the blissing out and other side of the storyline, right? It's probably important to realize as well that the people that we see in the public eye, whether it's politicians or otherwise, the Carneys and the Trudeaus of the world are minions. They're useful idiots. They're not necessarily, of a parasite or predator class themselves. They are representatives of that. They're the actors on behalf of that particular construct, but they're not really capable themselves of that level of intelligence, as it were. They're just shills. They're paid and coerced and more than likely groomed to behave in the ways that they do. And those stories, those lives, those patterns, these people that come into the fore, that's 10, 20, 30, 40 years in the making, right? And when you step back and look from behind the scenes, who instigated and initiates and proliferates, propagates, and creates these things, who funds them, who backs them. That's, again, go back to the principle of the idea, not the who, the what that you see in front of you that you're getting angry at every time you see on the screen, or some ridiculous thing they said today, some new asinine policy that they're initiating, some new, some other ridiculous green agenda thing, all these parasitic sort of ridiculous and wasteful agendas that are playing out. Then it's not their ideas, right? They're things that are coming from a different place, a different energy. It's all founded and framed and maintained by that low level, life sucking and soul suppressed sort of energy. But they aren't the ones that came up with this. They were just guided in and instructed and shaped into those types of people that are useful in the public eye, because they sway the consensus, they sway the collective, they influence the minds of millions, possibly billions. And when they're getting involved with these transnational sort of operations and, funding these proxy wars and all the rest of it, that's just, they're playing their roles. But they're useful idiots. They're complete morons that don't really have the capacity, I don't believe, to process what they're actually doing and what they're a part of. They're convinced, on some level, these bureaucrats and all these players in the public eye, even celebrities and all these people that are spouting off about things they clearly know nothing about, they are just acting out a part. They are just part of the machine. They are paid and promoted to act as if they know, to act as if they are in the rights, to act as if they are on the, the good side, to act as if they are acting on humanity's behalf. They are actors placed in positions so that we can idolize, admire, fanboy and fangirl over these things and these people that are complete constructs that are nothing, likely very much nothing like that, were you to actually meet them in person, right? So when you consider where you're directing your energies and what's distracting you and where you're getting emotionally charged and triggered and all these things, just remember that that's by design. That's made. The words they're saying, the ideas, the policies, the laws, these things that they're introducing, the plain and blatant corruption, the obvious weak characters, that spineless cowards that these people are, the shifty, squirrely, weird the way they present themselves. They're a character. They're an idea, an egregore, a representative of something greater, something far more ancient and powerful. That's just the latest iteration. That's just the latest, cartoon character that's been put out in the public eye. That's just the latest thing that we can put all our energy and focus towards. Like, that's evil, that's them, that's the one we need to take down. If we just take them out, then things will be good. And then, but another one will come into it. Well, take them out and then everything will be fine. Well, but then, you're not solving anything. And if anything, you're creating martyrs, and you're creating ideas and reasons and justifications for the machine, for the predators to come out in force and to instill new parasitic ideas and laws and restrictions because you chose to engage with that silliness. To be sure, the real power is inside out. The real spark is within. The real conscious, awake and aware creator being is inside. Outside of us is information, it's data, it's ideas, it's reflections, it's feedback loops, it's concepts and collaborations, constructs and contracts and offerings that give us bearings, that help us find our bearings, to help us recalibrate, to help us to reinitiate at times, to reset, to really take stock of what we're doing and where we're putting our energies. It's all useful information, and all these useful idiots out there are good to just help us steer the ship in a different way, to help us take back those controls, to realize that we must ultimately decide and choose how much to engage with those things, how much to believe in any of these things, whether or not to question them, whether or not to research or analyze and scrutinize and interrogate them a little further, if it's even worth doing that, to put that kind of energy into it, because it's a never-ending cycle, it's a never-ending story, and these things are far ancient than we can possibly comprehend, and in this one life, we can't really get to the bottom of anything, except perhaps our why. Except perhaps, our justification, our reasons for coming into this story again, and what we can explore in this particular life before it's done. What we can take home, as it were. Because I think the only thing we ultimately gain is the insights, the stories, the narrative, the experiences, expressions, the emotionality, the whole spectrum of what it is to be human, the good, the bad, the black, the white, the up, the down, the whole roller coaster of this one short life, the ideas, and when you're done with it, you're just, that was cool. Wonder if I should do it again. But let's try it this way this time. We can get distracted and derailed on the daily, really, depending on our capacity for presence and appreciation for the multitude of distractions and ideas and influences that can come into our life and alter our trajectory and alter our path and interrupt and disrupt what we thought we were supposed to be doing. So keep in mind that these parasitic and predatory energies are ever present, but they're not the whole story, as usual, right? They are elements of the story. They're slivers of the spectrum. They're that counter to your creation, your creatorship. They're that reflecting mechanism. They're that trickster energy that allows you to evolve and unravel your deeper truth, to remember your true nature and who and what you really are. They're there to just constantly keep pushing and prodding you to become greater, better, remembering at your true capacity and your true potentials. And that this is all very transient, it's all very temporary, and ultimately you're not really going to change anything about this place. All you're going to do is gather information, gather ideas, have more experiences, have more love, hate, emotionality. You're going to have more trauma and injury, you're going to have more healing and all the rest of it. Only things that we can experience in this particular way, in this human avatar, in this realm. So soak it up, dive in, and take from it everything that you can. It's gone like that, and it'll pass very quickly. So don't worry too much about solving world problems and such. This is not likely why you're here. Certainly be active, involved if you want to be an activist of sorts, if you want to try and change things. You can't possibly think you're going to change them by protesting and rioting and all the rest of it. That's simply playing into their scripts, and they're laughing at you because of your silliness. If you want to really change the world, you have to change you and your perception and how you present yourself, and understand that you are the creator. You are from the inside out, projecting into this world how you want it to be and how you want to experience it and what you want to get out of it. You're not going to save anyone. You're not going to solve anything. That's not the point. It's a very short trip. So don't fall into the trap of the parasitic and predatory ideas, because they're everywhere. And try not to embody them yourself, because there's more to life than just being, reactionary and having to run away or fight things. Go beyond all that. Have a good one.
It's been coming down every other day, but they tell me we are in drought season. That's not my story, not my reality. No matter what you force my eyes to see, and the sky is falling right on top of me, but they tell me